So I'm not a podium person either, and I don't have the benefit of having something in front of me. I'm an alpha when it comes to being on stage, and I'm absolutely reserved when I'm off stage, so please bear with me. I wanted to take this opportunity to thank both Abby and Doug. I really do appreciate coming back here. I love my alma mater. I'm very proud of this place. I learned how to learn here, and I'll talk about that just in a second. It's really interesting. Abby chastised me this morning because all yesterday I was listening to everybody talk, and I was thinking, oh, I have something to say about that, or I have a project that relates to that. So I kept on my little iPhone asking people back in the studio to send me imagery. So last night, after we had dinner, I was back in my hotel room plugging it all back into the PowerPoint. So I speak off the cuff. It's the way I work. I think about an idea and I try to present it to you. So there may be some issues, and we'll just see how it goes, but I do thank you for your patience. I also want to thank Kelsey for helping me retrieve my last slide. It happened today. I was not allowed to do it today, but I did. And anyway, it's always interesting when you're in a symposium and you go back to your hotel room that evening and you turn on the news and you're working at your desk and you start hearing things that are related to the stuff that you're doing in that symposium. So last night on the Weather Channel, because I'm stupid enough to watch the Weather Channel, they're talking about the floods that are happening in Indianapolis. And last spring, I was at a Livabilities Challenge symposium in Indianapolis, where we were talking about the issues that are facing that, and I think Professor Garrick mentioned Indianapolis in his presentation as well. Just north of the center of the city, there's a lot of asphalt there, and all this rain has been causing a significant amount of flooding that has been taking place over the last 24 hours. And one of the results of that Livability Challenge symposium was to convince these big box stores to rip up portions of their asphalt because it wasn't being used. Literally, they did not have enough patrons. So create greater filtration, percolation rates by actually removing some of that asphalt and working back into the natural systems. The other thing was that on the Today Show, the running story, the first story was about gas prices in California, which are just at $4.99 per gallon. And the increase in, I think they cited 5 to 10% increase in public transit use over the last 3 months, something like that. It was extraordinary. That's absolutely relevant to what we're talking about here over these 2 days. So, I don't know, just wanted to let you know that we're important. Like, it's happening right now. It's vital. Okay, here we go. So I wanted to talk about certain issues, but largely through projects that I've completed or projects that are underway. I want to take a look at where we've been, where we're going. I recognize that we're on section 3, so this is about what's actually being enacted out there in the world. So we're going to take a look at understanding our changing landscape, early environmentalism, just a couple of slides on the history, the aspect of returning to the city, and then what happens in landscapes today, because it's actually fascinating. I'm very proud of being a landscape architect in the 21st century because where building architecture was about the 20th century, landscape architecture is the 21st century. It's an incredible discipline, very exciting time to be practicing right now. And then just some project examples. And I'm talking fast because Abby's going to give me the clue when it's time to shut up. So landscape architecture is an extraordinary discipline because it's actually the focus of so many other different disciplines, and we actually carry a lot of them in the work that we do. So I'm finding actually that in my practice I'm trying more and more in larger contextual projects. We're working with significantly broad regional systems down to intimate spaces within cities. My practice is mission statement is to create places that enhance life. And that is, everything that we do talks to this aspect of social sustainability. How do you bring people together while living together environmental, economic, and then social issues, the sort of tripartite of sustainability. And indeed, all of these things end up becoming a part of our discussion. And this is why I love Connecticut College. Sorry, I gotta talk to the kids for a second, because you are kids compared to me right now. I really enjoyed practicing or learning at a liberal arts school because I got to, was dictated that you had to take all these other classes before you declared your major. And the great thing about Connecticut College was that the professors that I was working with always said, tackle my discipline, if it's government or chemistry, through your interests. So mine was fine arts and art history, and I was writing government papers on Platonic philosophy and the art of the Koroid. So I was taking, ideas from our history and actually applying them to government classes, and I ended up getting A's, which was really cool because I didn't get A's. So this aspect of learning how to learn actually benefited me when I went out there in the realm of landscape architecture, because I had the capacity to speak to many different people about many different issues because of what I learned in a liberal arts school from the focus of my discipline. And that is an extraordinary gift to have when you're out there, being able to talk to just about everybody. Because I find myself in public process a lot. I find myself having to deal with engineers, so I talk to them in engineer speak. I have to deal with government, so I speak to them in government speak. And if you can do that, you can bring a lot to your own practice and how you face the world. Anyway, early environmentalism, Earth Day, everybody thinks back on that, at least I can remember it from the 1970s, and it still gets enacted once a year, but really not many people pay attention to it anymore. Then Ian McCarr started putting aspects of an understanding of natural systems to design. And I like to think that actually the firm that I practiced with, which was then Hannah Olin, now called Olin, took his interests in the natural systems and actually applied great design to it. So we've always been a socially sustainable practice, environmentally sustainable, economically sustainable. We just never talked about it. And now it's important to talk about, and I can point back to past projects about what that means. But so if those two things were really seminal, how did we end up here? What is it about this that didn't get adapted or adopted from those other issues? And that's kind of what I want to, think about as we're beginning this practice. So the biggest thing, actually, because one of my mantras is try to make cities better than suburbs. Try to make them more interesting than suburbs. People should not retreat to the suburbs at the end of the day. They should re-entrench in the culture of the city. I live downtown in Philadelphia. I walk to work if I'm not being dropped off by my partner. He has the trek. He goes 30 miles to Wilmington. So whoever stated that 30-mile statistic, I think it was Professor Garrick. My partner is one of those people that does that. But returning to the city becomes an important part, especially when you consider this is the only statistic you're going to see, the only chart. This is what I threw in today. It is actually the definition of untouched land. Less than 1% of our land is untouched by some manipulation by man. And so returning to the city becomes an important part of that. And indeed, our own city of Philadelphia, we're redefining our Delaware River waterfront. We're a true Mesopotamia in Philadelphia. We have the Schuylkill and we have the Delaware. The Delaware is cut off by the Highway Act. It's 95 running across the state. It's actually, I know you won't be able to see this pointer, but that's 95 right there. And it cuts us off from, there's our downtown, from our river. And so our studio is trying to figure out we're working with the city to figure out how to re-entrench ourselves, how to pull the natural systems back in, but also make it habitable for people. What's the social purpose that we're striving for? Landscapes are incredibly complex these days. People don't realize how complex they are, and that's my job as a landscape architect, and your job as in the School of the Environment to figure out how to talk about these issues. Our poster child, long before there was High Line, there was Bryant Park. And Bryant Park is one of our studio's success stories. If you haven't been there, you might know it from Fashion Week or from Project Runway Lake and things like that. But it used to look like this. It used to be a place where people would not go. The natural systems were actually failing, the no percolation rate happening there. But worse than that, it was a social barrier. It was a place where the nefarious went to actually conduct meetings and exchange dollars and needles and things like that. So nobody wanted to go in there. And so working with Holly White, also known as William White, a social anthropologist, and I encourage everybody to study social anthropology as part of their practices or their learning about urbanity and urbanism. We figured out how to get rid of this and how to deal with this at the same time, and in the end, created an incredible economic tool, right? What we found was that land value increased exponentially adjacent to extraordinary civic spaces. So when you reinvest in the city, you can actually talk about it in metrics of dollars. It's a very valuable term when you're talking about developers, to public agencies, to the people that govern us. If you can put these issues into dollar terms, they light up. They love that stuff. It's not about aesthetics, it's about dollars and value. So you end up with environments like this where people come and they discuss and they exchange information, and that's an incredibly valuable part of growing smartly, right? Bringing people together for communication. If you can bring people together for communication, you're going to solve a lot of the ills within this world. Most people don't realize it's a green roof. We actually inserted 2 layers of building underneath the lawn there. That's one of the faults of our practice. We don't talk about the sustainable gestures that we do a lot. We have to for LEEDs, but one of our worst fears is putting signage everywhere that tells you what we've done. So it's great that nobody knows that there's a building under there, but there is. And you get tens of thousands of people there. And if that's not sustainability in practice and the rejuvenation of the urban condition, I don't know what is. You can do this in every town. So this complex layer of landscape has to do with, the site on the left is actually the same site on the right, just after being reconditioned. This was part of the spoils of the World Trade Centers when they were excavating for the construction of the site. It was the expansion of Battery Park. And that was the design of Wagner Park that my partner Cindy Sanders did. We understand that soils are a system, that they're actually part of this vibrancy, and that's actually why I chose landscape architecture over building architecture, because I like the fact that in building architecture, when you construct something, it begins to fall apart almost immediately. Entropy sets in. In landscape architecture, when you build something, you're working with static systems and with living systems, and there's growth and change that happens as a result of that. So that's really exciting to me, that you actually have an effect that goes on for a great deal of time. So again, that's Wagner Park, that's where the soils were placed. We're finding the tertiary places in cities actually learning how to design over structure. Those same places are these same places. In fact, Canary Wharf in London is actually a new financial district of the 80s. That's entirely over constructed land. It's actually, there's a service system and a roadway system underneath that entire portion of the city. We just designed it in such a way on this left side that it actually looks like it's on terra firma. And so tertiary spaces like railway yards become great civic spaces, or parking garages become sculpture gardens. It's the fact that nothing should do just one thing. Everything should have complexity to it. Things should do multiple things to be successful. Redefining our waterfronts. This happens to be Rincon Park in San Francisco, into part of the connective tissue of a city, trying to figure out how to make that all happen. Or in fact, the removal of a highway means the potential expansion of an entire zone of the city. This one not through, it was through a natural act, the earthquake that happened in the late 90s, or late 80s, meant that the expressway ended up coming down, and this whole portion of Mission Bay, which was not much of anything, could be expanded to become a viable portion of the city. And so, as landscape architects, we're really defining the fabric of a city. And then understanding that people have a right to be a participant in that practice. That hearing and listening to them is important. Understanding what they want in their culture, in their society, is part of smart growth. And then it's very timely. We have people writing about a lot of these issues in terms of slow food and what it means to actually have urban farming, or what the tipping points are for aspects of culture. And indeed, this is one of those things that I flew in just yesterday. This is a hospital that I'm working on in Indianapolis, where we're actually taking the roof of the clinic building. It's a large campus, but this one particular portion actually becomes a productive landscape where they're going to be raising tomatoes and other vegetables and other nutritious plants for use in their new plaza. There'll be a cafe where that circle is. This happens to be a catch-all hospital. It's a public hospital. So giving people the right to learn about nutrition and teaching them what it means to eat well, to better themselves, becomes a part of the practice. So I just want to talk about a couple of examples. I hope I'm moving quickly enough. All right. Yale University Science Hill. This is a whole district of Yale that our practice has had a chance to inform. I'm working right here at the School of Business, and I finished this piece here, which is the master plan for the Botanic Garden. Other partners have been working throughout. What we realized was we had an opportunity to work within this acreage and actually convince the university to, who have significant sustainable goals, to actually allow us to connect the tissue. That is, to work with the systems in such a way that their goals, which are here, could be part of our goals, which was the idea of thinking about all of these systems relative to Science Hill and putting them into a plan, which included, at least in the case on the right side, the manipulation of water and how water moves through the system. Water is going to be more important than oil, folks. So I know you all know that, but it's a word that we have to get out there. And indeed, beginning to think about the zones through topographic change, how to actually district whole portions of this urban campus. We're going to talk about that little guy right there, number 2, as an example. This is Croom Hall. It's the School of Forestry on Yale's campus. And really, we had the opportunity to actually define what that zone would be like and how to manipulate the water through it. So the proposal was to, instead of shunting the water underground, which is perfectly legitimate, it's the appropriate thing to do to work with that system, to actually work with the system in such a way that it becomes part of the social expression. That this cleansing of water through this LEED Platinum project would actually become part of the social purpose where people might gather. So that's just a diagram of what's happening there. And indeed, cleansing the water through plant roots, it keeps recirculating, it gets cleaner and cleaner, it gets used for toilet flushing and for irrigation. The water never actually leaves the site, so we're just keep reusing it. But these are the creds that come with it, the metrics that happen as a result. But really, for me, this is actually what's important. People end up gathering around it. It becomes part of the social fabric of this particular school. And as I said, it's that social metric that drives my design work and that of my partners. Washington Canal Park is a new district in Washington, D.C. There's our work at the Washington Monument. I'm working on a new levee project right here at 17th and Constitution. But the thing that we're going to look at right now is in the Southeast District. It's a 3-block long new park. And this is something that I call an economic driver. This is actually a collaboration between developers and public agencies. They realized that if they wanted to change the character of the Southeast District of Washington, D.C., that they needed to give a quality of life that would actually work with both the worker housing that they're putting there as well as the high-end housing, market rate housing that they're putting there. So we're looking at these 3 blocks, which happen to be a former bus depot. It's now under construction. The 3 blocks from M through I are as such. This is an existing building here, an office building on the right, a hotel that has its back to block number 2. This is a new site. The top 2 sites on the left, above the park, will be worker housing, and the construction on the right would be market rate housing. So it's a great confluence of our culture that's happening here. I just wanted to talk with you about what it means to reinvigorate these old spaces within cities. How do you keep people in the urban condition? The 3rd block is this one. We were looking to our work at Bryant Park as sort of part of the model. The idea that there would be an open plat of grass that could be used for flexible purposes, whether it's movie night or a band playing, but that it would have the flexibility to allow people to gather for multiple functions. So it's a larger open space. We were working with building architects as our consultants who helped me think about what the pavilions in this park might be like. This is an old canal site. It's part of the old C&O canal system. And so I had this notion that the pavilions that march through this park should have some relation to the old barges that actually used to be on the site. So this is actually that pavilion where during the summertime a young kid stands there during the day and rents you a chair for $2 and your license. You get a chair, you go put it out there, you sun yourself, and at the end of the day, or when you're done, you bring back, he keeps the $2 to go to school, and he gives you back your license. At night, it glows like this, and the more people that are in the park, the brighter it glows, so there's this sort of interaction that takes place with regard to that. You can see here singing in the rain in the background, very moving and such. Block 2, we took our cues from a previous project at Wagner Park, which you saw earlier, trying to create a flexible play space for kids, as well as a dramatic fountain, and there's the second pavilion. But we're really thinking about what it means to come into a neighborhood that is actually not yet created. So we're designing for people that we haven't even met yet. We don't even know what the culture of this neighborhood will be. So you have to design with great flexibility. You have to design for young parents. You have to design for urbanites who are single. You have to design for those who might be coming back to the city to, have a great latter part of their life. And as well as culturally define the spaces as being very diverse. The first block is the most civic. It is where there's a monumental fountain here, like these, a basinless fountain where kids can play. It's also where the cafe exists in the middle pavilion. And it's also a place where ice skating will happen in the middle of winter. And this is actually going to be the nation's second linear skating rink. We're very excited about the prospect. There was this notion of people used to skate on canals in the wintertime, these long linear treks. So could we somehow create this linear trek in the winter that people could continuously loop? So this is our vision for what it might be like during the wintertime. And then a summertime shot of the first pavilion, which has an occupiable space in its sort of signature cube. What it will look like marching along the street, the three cubes as they float in the canal below. But be sure, this is actually a working system, right? This is not just about people gathering in a park. It's actually a system that cleanses water. And it's not just about the water that hits the park. We've actually we're capturing water from buildings that are not yet built, as well as extensive portions of the neighborhood. So this 3-block long system actually cleanses water and reuses it on site before it goes into the Anacostia waterway. It's a machine, it's a living machine that benefits our society. So that's really what it takes to make all of that work. And that's part of what we bring to this as landscape architects. The region has its own numbers. You have to capture 3.2 inches of water. We went beyond that. That was our goal. This is the 1818 King map. It shows you the old canal system that went up in front of the Capitol. There's the White House right there. That's our 3 blocks. The inspiration for what that water cleansing system might be like came from the sedimentation that was occurring in the canal. The canal only lasted 2 years for all that they put into it. It only lasted a year and a half or so because it kept, the sediment kept building up. Well, if you've taken botany classes, like I have, you know that that's about succession. And so the idea was that that system from the Anacostia up to the hinterlands would be expressed as part of the old canal. The canal was this wide, but we just sort of had this diagram that became the water system within the park. So the primary open water was part of the cleansing process. The secondary and tertiary also part of the water process. It moves from block 3 to block 1, and it continues to clean itself, get captured, be reused for toilet flushing and for irrigation on the site. And then if there's an extreme overload, then it gets, through a weir system, gets put into the Anacostia, but never in an unclean state. So that's actually what the rain garden looks like. It's where actually the cleansing process takes place along the edge of the park. These are just some of the metrics that happen with that. These days you can't design without having metrics. You have to satisfy people's need to understand truly what it means, not just to say something, but to actually enact it. And that's what this is about. And then again, this notion of social and economic issues as well. So keep your eye on this park. It's actually under construction, and hopefully you'll see it not in the too far future. And then I just wanted to touch really briefly about this competition that we just finished called the ARC Wildlife Crossing Competition, Design Competition. Growth has its impacts on natural systems, not just on water, but on wildlife. And indeed, this is just our submission cover for it, but really what it's about is how this wild crossing, as we call it, can actually marry dynamic systems, that is wildlife corridors that are interrupted by static systems, transportation routes, that the highway system that goes through our country. So this is the problem. The impact of wildlife and vehicles. And you'd be surprised who supports this. Actually, it's the insurance companies are looking for a solution. They're paying more and more dollars for collisions. And they want to see this stop because they can't afford this. It's an impact on us as in terms of our premiums. So trying to figure out how to solve this terrible problem is part of it. So those of you who have your eyes closed, you can look up again, because I see that some of you did. I apologize. This was going to be that impactful. The notion that this is the West Vale Pass I-70 one. It's mile 187.4, excuse me, 187.4. It's mapped as being one of the significant collision points in our country between vehicles and animals. And so the competition said, all right, let's figure it out. Put together comprehensive teams, landscape architects, engineers, bridge engineers, architects, environmentalists, ecologists. Let's figure out how to solve this problem. So this is how we solve the problem. The program was quite explicit. I'll point out a couple of the things. Be cost effective in terms of materials. Respond ecologically to the situation and anticipate future issues, including global warming. Be flexible and modular in terms of how these things get put together, because you want to reuse them potentially. And be adaptive in terms of the mobility of wildlife, particularly in the result of wildlife trails that actually might move dynamically because of global warming and other issues. Have it be pedagogic, should teach people things. It should be ecologically appropriate habitat. There should be traffic pullouts, because again, we want to teach people about what this is, so people should learn when they pull over to look at it. It should accommodate a new rail system that will go from Denver to Vail. And it should accommodate an additional 2 lanes of traffic, because they intend to expand I-70 from 4 lanes to 6. So in terms of the selection criteria, they were looking for conventional solutions that were innovative. They should be inspiring. They should have educational purpose to it. It should adapt. It should put together all of these things that we've been talking about. And the design should be something in the realm of spectacular. It should also have sustainability as part of its core and be thoughtful. And so I'm just trying to get there. All right, so this is actually I-70 running along here. This is the area of the bridge. The solid green lines are actually trails that we mapped as a result of looking at where animals were moving. And you could really begin to tell why this point was so dramatic. All of these trails that are dark green ended right there at that water body. And they tried to find their way back down to this system on the lower right. And so the dotted lines are where we're trying to connect this system back together using this bridge. So we look to the shape of the toroid, an extraordinary shape that allows you to pick any number of different pieces of it and find a solution that would be applicable to landscapes that were high on one side, low on the other, at the same elevation, shifting. You can find any number of shapes on a toroid and then solve them in any number of problems across the United States. Our toroid was 100 times larger than the bridge itself. So there's I-70 in its current configuration. It's expandable to also carry more traffic and the new trains. The piers that we put to gently hold up this construct. The drainage system that became integrated into this bridge. The diagrid, which was part of that toroid form. Diagrids are one of the strongest elements in nature. You find them in your muscles and other cellular structures, but we used it to create the structural form of the bridge. There was a parapet fence that had to act on the bridge and then come down into the landscape around it to prevent animals from running on the road. And this is just the analysis of the contortions of the bridge. And then finally, glass reinforced plastic habitat modules, which I'll talk about in a second. So the form of the bridge was this diagrid structure, which had a drainage system in it, and then you would insert modules of landscape. Now, we've been designing landscapes over structure for an incredible number of years, for about 30 years or so. And our studio is one of the leaders in this realm. So we kind of knew that this would work. The idea was to actually create a system that could receive the component parts of any number of conditions, whether you're planting trees and you need 4 feet of soil by 6 feet by 6 feet, or you're planting mesic landscapes where you only need 24 inches of soil. And the idea was then to create this Pringle shape that would allow for traffic to move underneath it, but also create this valley condition in which animals would cross the road. The idea was to create normalcy, not to attract animals, but to create a sense of normalcy so that the animals didn't even understand that they were moving across a bridge. And so the upturned edges became sound barriers, so that you could, and the structural system dampened the vibration, so that animals would actually not know that they were on a crossing. And this is just diagrams to show how we were trying to actually pull the landscape across. The concept was that there would be, xeric grassland on either edge, and that you would have these ecotones that would actually move through the bridge, so that animals, if they were attracted to one particular type, would just simply move along that type. And so this spruce and fir forest was attracted to moose and to bear, to lynx and to marten. And just on the right side, notice how the complexity of the overlay builds upon itself. The xeric grassland was conducive to this series of megafauna. Mesic shrubland was for those megafauna. Wet meadow for these guys, etc. It just kept building itself up. And that because it was a modular landscape, so not only the structure of the bridge was modular, but the landscape itself was modular, you could actually change it if you needed to. Say the lynx, which is doing very well in that area in its reintroduction, because of global warming, it decided to continue its routes other places. You could actually lift up the landscape modules that were pertained to that particular piece of type of megafauna and apply something else to it to actually then help another type of animal move across. So it was this idea that you could plant them, change them, put something else in, continually change the landscape. So that's our bridge on the right there. And just you can see I-70 just in the distance. This was about finding the crossing. We always name our drawings. This one is the wild crossing itself. This is within the arc of the bridge. So you get a sense, you can see the parapet fence on the left there. And so you get a sense of how the Pringle shape and the ecotones move through so that the megafauna don't even understand that they're on something that is not nature. This is the sort of symbolic portion, what's the fantastic design that people will see, right? The idea was to make something iconic as a threshold to veil. And so you get to see the system underneath, the diagram underneath, and you get this sort of threshold condition happening. This is the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, or the Fresh Prince of Vale. But it's the wintertime scene where the lynx is moving across. And then here is the learning curve, which is part of the pull-off. And we situated it so that actually the pull-off happened at a particular topographic elevation. The land was dropping where the bridge was, so you weren't even climbing to then look down over top of the bridge. And the notion was that you would have these feed loops of animals, and you'd have a couple of pod examples, and the types of animals that you're trying to help them across. And you can get a sense of where the fence is coming off of the bridge and moving across the land there. And this was our view from above, to give you a sense of scale and the condition of the land that we were trying to create. If you want to take a look at this, please go to the art competition website. So really we were one of 5 teams chosen from an international submission of hundreds. So I'm very proud that we actually were able to participate. So again, what happens to this? If this is where we are, where do we want to be? The other problem is that, right? This is the other social system that is challenging to us. So when you think about smart growth, also think, particularly you guys up there, what it means to be living in a world of that, where you're living like this. And if communication is the goal to smart growth, that is, how do you keep people informed? How do you keep people speaking? How do you get from that to this? This is Independence Park. Our office is that building in the distance. We create places that enhance life. The idea is to actually bring people into a condition of communication. My big, hairy, audacious goal is to create an environment in which very different types of people come together. Say an art history professor and a young protester, and they don't know each other, and as a result, they sit down next to each other because they feel good about the place that they're in. And through sitting next to each other, they strike up a conversation, and that conversation through the course of it, they come up with an idea, and that idea, 10 years down the road, saves the world, I'll have been successful because I created the place in which that idea happened. That's really what it means for me as a practitioner for smart growth. It's the concept of bringing people together in a condition of communication. So, did I do it?
Yeah.
Okay, so I made my time. That was my biggest fear.